Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Innovating HR, Hiring Practices, Virtual Drug Screening Strategies for a Modern Workforce. I'm Cynthia Woods, Vice President of Marketing at AccuSource HR, and I will serve today as today's moderator. So it is my pleasure to introduce today's facilitator. Today we have Andreas Klotz. He is the Vice President of Business Development and Employer Care Solutions at Novir. Andreas leads Novir's effort in developing local, national, and global business opportunities while also nurturing key relationships with manufacturers, corporations, employees, and end users for InstaClear, InstaGuard, and InstaCheck. After earning his bachelor's degree in international business from UW-Whitewater, Andreas gained 2 decades of experience in toxicology, drug testing, and diagnostics. Before we jump into our discussion today, and I pass this over to Andreas, we're going to go ahead and do a poll question. So there should be a poll question that is popping up for you now. Perfect. And hopefully you all can see the poll question just fine. And my question is, have you experienced challenges conducting employment drug screening collections for any of these worker populations? And your options are remote employees, workers at specific job sites, staff working outside of 8 to 5 business hours. So that would be like staff doing shift work, maybe working weekends. And then, or you haven't encountered any challenges with clinic collections. So we're going to give it a couple minutes, let everyone have a chance to get their responses in. And as soon as we have our responses in, Danielle will go ahead and provide us with our responses. Okay, perfect. So looks like remote employees, we have about 23% of remote employees that have that basically have had some, or employers with remote employees have had some challenges. In addition to that, it appears that that right behind that, or right in front of that, I should say, is staff working outside of 8 to 5 hours. And then following up at the end, we have our workers at specific job sites. So it looks like probably better than 66% of organizations have encountered some sort of issues with drug screening collections for any of these unique situations. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Andreas.
Hey, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, AccuSource, for the opportunity to present the group with a literal change in how HR can conduct their hiring practices via a virtual drug testing solution, and how that can directly, impact and change, some of the strategies that HR and talent acquisition people are encountering when they're trying to hire employees today. So our agenda today is, as you can see, kind of fivefold. Going to create the layup here for how this virtual drug testing really has its place in the marketplace. And you'll see that there are a number of arenas and vertical markets where virtual drug testing works extremely well. The evolving workforce, right? The landscape of what that's like, and how that landscape literally changed the people-centric type hiring practices, how that virtual drug testing works within that landscape and those hiring practices, and then what are the benefits of a virtual drug testing program. And then, of course, my hope is that you lace it up with a bunch of questions for us, because this is something brand new, but something that has been in the works for the better part of a couple of years, and that's the pandemic that we're talking about, and some of the things that the pandemic taught us that we're kind of bringing forward into today's workforce landscape. So we were kind of, say, forced from a behavioral standpoint into a literal change and how we worked. So much of us, if it wasn't an employment arena that was deemed necessary to have people in person, the rest of us were working in a remote capacity. And by doing that, we began to see how that could change and could alter and really could benefit employers. But even today, we're seeing at least 2/3 of the people who are employed working in either a fully remote capacity or in a hybrid capacity. And you can see here how it extends across a variety of industries. It's not, strictly a single industry or vertical market. It really transcends things from IT to finance to architectural, engineering, even construction and manufacturing, entertainment, right? Sports and media and legal. All of these workforces have been impacted by a remote desire to work in that capacity or in a hybrid capacity. But what's really truly unique is how that has kind of embedded that mindset of saying, I want to remain in a remote work environment. And employees are literally willing to take pay cuts to have that flexibility in their workday. And what we think that it would be white collars who would consider a role that doesn't offer any days of quote remote work. Over a third said they would look for a different job. If the employer didn't offer it. We were in the pandemic, everyone was remote, and we came out of that pandemic, and employers were saying, please, we want you to come back, into the office. And a third of these people were saying, well, I'm going to look for a different job. I'm going to look for a different job if they're not, going to give me the chance to continue to work in a remote capacity. And I think there are benefits to that, and we would all agree that it provides you flexibility. It maybe breaks up your day where you can get to some things that you haven't been able to get to. You communicate differently with people in a remote capacity, and your challenges on how you communicate, what you will lay, things of that nature, how you say what you say, all kind of become a little bit more under a microscope. So it has positively impacted our lives, and the workforce is exuding that with their desire to continue to work in a remote capacity. This is an interesting visual aid regarding where people are working remote, the lay of the land. So I apologize for the pun, but the USA Today brought this out from the U.S. Census Bureau regarding this data, and it is not like we're confining this to one region. It is nationwide, where the states are saying they have upwards of 20+% of the people, working from home. Literally 1/5 of people are all working from home. And, state by state, that adaptation, and I think part of the impact of that adaptation is by industry. Some states perhaps are more heavily laden with IT, or some states are more heavily laden, in that manufacturing belt. But all in all, it is here to stay. Working in a remote capacity is here to stay. That has also changed how the population has thought about where they can work. I think we've all heard of people that have said, I can work virtually all the time. So I've decided I'm going to move to Colorado. I want to work from a home, up in the mountains. Or perhaps someone has said, I've always wanted to go to Spain. I'm going to deal with the time change, and I'm going to work, from a home in Spain. At any rate, those are perhaps some of the extremes, but people are living in a more rural capacity. That's almost 1/5 of the population is living in a rural capacity. But there's a trade-off to that. And we're talking about access to services in those rural areas. People are having to travel longer to get to their food store, to get to their place of business. Frankly, just to get to any level of service, it's going to take more time to get to those specialty services. And if they think, ahead of time where I want to work in a more rural setting, they're just less available. So this is changing not just in the service industry, but also in the healthcare landscape, which is a very dynamic situation that we're talking about. We've all perhaps read about healthcare facilities that have closed because of these situations. And I want to point directly towards one case that is quite alarming, but it totally speaks towards what we're experiencing in these rural communities. It's a hospital in the Eau Claire area, Chippewa Falls area in Wisconsin. It's known as the Hospital Sisters Health System, Sacred Heart, and then Prevea Health. 19 facilities closed. This was this year. 19 facilities closed. Can you imagine how those people in those areas then all of a sudden lost that level of accessibility to healthcare? These hospital closures are making it super difficult, not just obviously for Wisconsin. This is a national concern. And it's not just that accessibility that people are losing, they're losing those jobs in healthcare. So there's thousands of people that are affected by this. It is part of what has changed the landscape of healthcare and access to healthcare in our country. So what are we looking towards regarding people-centric hiring practices? I think one of the things, then this is again, we're pulling some of these thoughts forward from the pandemic, that work culture, I think we would all agree that phrase, work culture, is part of every person's question when they're going for or through that interview process. What is your work culture like? And that is a thing that prospective employees are banking a lot of their decisions on, what that culture is like. Are they an organization that is forward thinking? Have they been recognized as some of the best places to work? Is it a collaborative organization? Are they, strong with sharing their strengths and working towards innovation and recognizing the value and placing the value on their people, and how that then translates into, fairness for all the employees? This work environment has become a mainstay in the interview process, and that's part of that first line of sight into those elements of an organization, what HR and talent acquisition individuals are hearing, what they are challenged with making sure that they can address and are working in every single one of these capacities as an organization that values their people. So let's face it, when you go through a would-be drug testing process, it's part of, and this is something that we've discovered, in speaking with HR professionals and talent acquisition professionals. We know that this part of the process is kind of dreaded. I mean, you've just been given a verbal offer and you've accepted it, and you're excited. You're excited, that warm, I always call it that warm fuzzy, and then you're advised that you have to go and get a drug test done. Well, we know first off, you're going to have to probably take time away from your current job. Many times it's time consuming because you have to travel. It's probably not right around the door, right next door to you. So that's inconvenience. It's that, frankly, the experience that you go through at a clinic can be considered invasive, can be considered impersonal. But the employer they have to ensure that they're creating a safe and a productive workplace. That's what drug testing policies help to ensure. The other piece of this, when you have to talk about conducting a drug test, and even when you do go to a clinic and you have to present a sample to the clinic, this is a continuing and ever increasing issue. You can look towards data sets like the Quest Diagnostics Drug Testing Index, and they continually point towards an ever increasing desire for people to circumvent the drug testing process. Whatever means they're taking to, quote, cheat the drug test is now over a quarter of the time. So 26+% of the time, people are going out of their way to try to change the result of their urine based drug test. There's only one way, well, I shouldn't say only one way, but there's a major way how we can change this. The observation of a drug test is really the piece of this puzzle that changes that dynamic. And when you're conducting a virtual drug test, the modality that's being used is oral fluid. And that allows us to visually affirm every part of this process, where we are literally able to record the event. So it's observed from start to finish. A proctor is always going to maintain that the person being screened on the other side of the event always remains within their purview. So the tampering or trying to circumvent the drug screen is so mitigated by that. It is a definitive change in reducing how often and how they may be able to circumvent a screening drug testing process. So to mitigate that risk, how virtual drug testing allows you as the employer. You can be an employer that is multinational. We're talking about, of course, anywhere in the world. And it enables your organization to streamline, to standardize it across all your teams. I think we can all safely say, even when you have developed a collection site network, and they might be tied into one of the major laboratories or other drug test aggregators, that defined experience is going to be different every single time they go to a clinic. And this enables consistency, it enables dependability, it enables a reliability and a predictability to that experience, because a virtual drug test should always embody a high level experience, something that leaves you with, oh my gosh, this employer made it so simple. And now they're able to access their rural employees without having them to travel anywhere. Or even the ones that are living in an urban setting don't have to travel to a location that might be considered unsafe, or having to sit in a crowded waiting room, sitting there for hours on end. A virtual drug test changes that dynamic immediately for an organization that begins to integrate this process so that they can standardize it across all their teams. And that can be within talent acquisition. It can be within their designated employee representative. It can be with environmental health and safety teams. All of them can take advantage of this type of process and program. So how does it work? It's very simple. We'll just use one case right now, and I'll go back to that HR person where they have a need to drug test an individual and they want to do it virtually. So they order the kit through a portal. And when that order is received, it's immediately shipped to that designated address. This is where the donor competes their drug test with the virtual proctor. The virtual proctor goes through a number of steps. I'll delineate and describe what those steps are to ensure the success of the process. But the donor is also tasked with some very simple steps to ensure that they will be successful on their end of the process. So it's really been boiled down into some very simple checks and balances so that when the drug testing process ensues, it's very comfortable, it's very simple, it's adaptive to the person's environment. And then once it's completed, immediately these results are reported into a digital platform where they are instantly available. So we can say conservatively that somewhere between 90 to 95% of the time, when a drug test is conducted, they're going to be negative. And that doesn't require then that sample to be sent for further evaluation. But all the things that lead up to getting that sample done and reported in this virtual environment can take as little as 10 minutes. So that information is immediately reported. The HR, the talent acquisition, they immediately get a notification that they can view the results in this portal. That's extremely powerful when they're looking at however many recs that they have open, and they can close this rec within a matter of minutes. That reflects differently on the employer. We go back to the expectation that employees have regarding the environment, the work environment, and it's an affirmation. Can you imagine the difference between sending someone to a clinic versus a virtual drug testing experience? Acting as an ambassador on behalf of that employer, and then that employee looks at that employer and says, boy, they're very forward thinking, they're very innovative with this part of the process. It transcends that into other avenues within that employer. It's a great way to extend that level of care that employees or say donor applicants are looking for. It really sets the stage. I'm going to give you an example of what a present day, let's say, user experience might be like. And we're talking about someone who has to visit a clinic in downtown Milwaukee, brick and mortar. And this clinic happens to be able to provide an appointment. We know very often that when you are charged with going to a clinic, appointments are not available. They just take them as they come. In this instance, Julie was able to get an appointment, but something happened during her morning where her babysitter, didn't arrive on time. So she eventually checked in for her appointment just after 9 o'clock in the morning. So this is that clinic-based customer experience I'm talking about. She still has to locate that clinic. She still has to try to schedule her time, and then she arrives late, like we were talking about. The medical assistant on site has scheduled, appointments, say back to back, and it's commonplace for, an Occ Health clinic that is busy, and most of them are very busy, that a quarter or even a third of those appointments or non-appointments, as we now know, are drug tests. So when you come into that environment, there's a lot of trepidation. There isn't much conformity at all. And in this instance, it's very common that you have to sit there and you have to wait to deliver your sample. So maybe when she drinks water and her test is actually due because she had to go to the bathroom and she's been waiting there that long, she wasn't able to provide a specimen to void in the cup. So this medical assistant, they're going to feel pressure. It's a crowded waiting room, and she's going to try to figure out how to close this as quickly as possible. But after 5 minutes, they determine that the specimen needs to be sent, to the laboratory for further review. And even if her sample is negative, guess what the medical assistant has to do? They have to fill out that paperwork, the quintessential chain of custody or custody and control form. So all this data is manually entered into their hiring system for that organization. She finally leaves at 12:30. It's been a 4-hour experience. 4-hour experience. And I would say there's really nothing about this experience you could say has a redeeming quality to it. What could it be like in a virtual experience? So the employer sends the kit directly to the candidate. They receive the kit in the mail. They schedule their time. Now, clinics are, we'll say, open 8 to 5 or 9 to 6. They have to do that during that time frame. In a virtual environment, they do it when it's convenient for them. Maybe they're an early riser and they want to do it at 6 a.m. Maybe they have a super busy day and they look at it and say, I'm not going to be able to get to this until 9 or 10 p.m. That's fine. That's why virtual drug testing creates that accessibility regarding that appointment. So she selects her time. Right now it's when it's about 12:30 Central Standard here in the US. She selects her time for 12:45, and that's when she meets the proctor in the comfort of her own home. She's just she just can't believe how simple this whole process was, and she's able to enjoy the rest of her day. And of course, when they're finished, these results are immediately available to the employer. Like I had referenced before, when it's done, a notification is sent, email, can also be sent via SMS to the employer that everything has been completed. But at the end of the day, we're talking about 10 minutes. 10 minutes to conduct Julie's oral fluid drug test, a vastly different experience. I go back again to how this reflects differently for the employer in this particular way. They're going to have a preconceived notion now that this employer is thinking about the employee, is thinking about what they can do to change that dynamic. It's a hyper competitive world for hiring people today. Whatever edge can be provided to HR, to talent acquisition professionals in maintaining accessibility and providing a different experience is paramount to the hiring process. And that then differentiates that employer from other employers that they are competing with for that particular candidate. So let's take a look at what that quote end user experience, may be like. What you see here on the laptop there to the right, that is the proctor that is proctoring this individual at their place of residence. The kit is right in front of the desk, right there on the desk. It remains within the purview of the proctor. So we're setting the stage. It's a well-lit area. We're advising them to not take phone calls or SMS messages during that time frame. We just want to be sure that there aren't any encumbrances that could happen during that process. So setting it up right for success is where it all begins. So you see here that on the right-hand side, there's a serialization that goes with this process, and each kit has a serial number attached to it. And I'll go through why that's critically important to a virtual drug test process. But on the left-hand side, you see that the proctor is verifying that person's identity. They're going to ask for maybe a government issued ID, or maybe the employer provides an ID that they can verify this person's identity. Also, I think very, very important to this process. And they're also going to want to see that this kit hasn't been opened or tampered with. It says that on the kit, do not open. Instructions are emailed and are SMS'd, to the donor in advance, and it's done multiple times. But we also want to verify it when we come into the virtually proctored session that the kit has not been opened or tampered with. Okay, so here we see what's going on. Again, this is an oral fluid drug test, and the first phase of this drug test, like I said, 90 to 95% of the time, that first phase is the rapid oral fluid drug test. And that rapid oral fluid drug test that you see here is very different. It's designed for a virtual environment. Most of the rapid oral fluid drug tests today require a lot more saliva than this particular device does. This device requires 1/20th the amount of all the other type of rapid oral fluid devices on the market today. What does that translate into? A much quicker collection process. We're talking about maybe 30 seconds that it takes to collect the saliva. Mind you, the proctor is advising the person being proctored how to collect the saliva. The how is just as important because we're trying to capture every type of saliva where it's produced inside the mouth. But 30 seconds of collection, then activating the device, and the device will provide a result in as little as a minute. So we're talking a minute and a half to maybe 2 minutes for this first phase of the drug test to be conducted. And we know it's always under the supervision of the proctor, always in the purview of the proctor. So the other part of it, that 5% of the time, they would go towards a secondary collection. I'll explain that in a little bit as to what that looks like. They're showing the proctor the result from the device. The proctor is reading the result and then records that information immediately at that particular appointment. They're done. So this is a streamlined, virtual drug testing is a very streamlined, it's standardized. You can say that it's standardized because the proctors are trained to standardize this process. They're utilizing a specific script. They're utilizing a process that has been validated time and time again. I will say this, that transferring what is being done in an in-person environment to a virtual environment is not necessarily kind of like a snap of the finger. It was a process that took some doing. And that was basically to understand, what are the caveats that you need to account for within a virtual environment. But it then translates into being able to do this on demand, 24/7. This process is 100% digital, no paperwork involved. And then you as the employers, you have transparent upfront pricing. It's the same every single time. And that service, you're going to come to know as being reliable service anytime, anywhere. So these are the use cases for virtual drug testing. Pre-employment, we've already explored that and defined what the benefits are of being able to proctor someone in the comfort of their own home. But what can we alter about post-incident or reasonable suspicion? And what can we do to create a higher level of efficacy when you're conducting random drug tests? So this is the pre-employment kit. These are the components that go into the pre-employment kit. Like I've said, the oral fluid rapid collection device. It's in a foil pouch. So we say, don't open the kit until you're instructed to do so. They're opening that kit in front of our proctor. Then they go to the rapid oral fluid drug test, which is in a foil pouch. We affirm that that foil pouch has not been opened. It also contains that secondary oral fluid lab admissible collection device. And then it contains in there the vial that collection device would go into, the tamper evidence seal that would go over the vial, and then that goes into the bio bag and then into the shipping bag with the affixed shipping label. All of that is contained within the pre-employment kit. It also contains services, and those services are when you need to send this to a laboratory, the shipping is included. It includes the screening of that saliva with the laboratory. And the reason why that's being done is to avoid false positives. And then it includes the confirmation of that specimen. And if needed, it also includes the services of a medical review officer. All in one kit. So in post-incident, we are talking about things that just don't happen sometimes between 9 to 5, and those situations where there are always contributing factors, and many times it's drug and alcohol that are contributing to this, but their urine-based tests are only detectable through what's metabolized in the body. That can take a while. That can take a while for the body to detect metabolized drugs. Employers today, and has become, we've become very aware of how employers are more concerned whether the employee is or isn't under the influence. And that's where oral fluid has a better, it's just a better modality to detect whether somebody might be under the influence in the workplace. And this, of course, can happen at 2 a.m. So how are we doing this, and what is the difference in the post-incident kit versus the pre-employment kit? But I showed before what that process is for ordering the drug test, how to process that. And in this case, it's the customer, it's your customer, or it's maybe you that is going to be calling for an urgent screening. This is a 24/7 on-demand service. So the proctor then answers that phone call. They take down the typical information, contact information for the donor, and the supervisor then hands that kit that they have on site in their facility to the donor. They sit down at a space just like we've created and talked about before in that pre-employment setting, well lit, flat surface. They're still going to verify their identity. They're still verifying the fact that they haven't ate, drank, or smoked anything, right, in advance. That very well may not be the case, but we still go through those checks and balances. They're going to be advised that this is an oral fluid drug test that we're conducting, that this whole scenario is recorded. Yes, this whole scenario, whether it's pre-employment, whether it's post-incident or random, they're recorded. So they're advised of that. And then it might be a case where the medical review officer is going to contact them. We ensue with the whole proctoring session, and when we're when that's completed, whether we do the first phase of that and it's done in a matter of minutes, or we have to conduct a secondary collection and then it's done, those results will eventually be reported in the same manner that we've talked about before. It's all reported digitally on a digital platform. This is the difference in the kit. So before I said 2 devices, oral fluid devices, a rapid oral fluid drug test and a secondary lab admissible oral fluid collection device. There's a third, and that's the oral fluid alcohol collection device. So when we conduct this, the oral fluid rapid alcohol test is done first because alcohol metabolizes in your system that much quicker. Then the oral fluid drug test ensues, and if needed, the third part of the process is secondary screening. But we are capturing all the reasons why somebody might be under the influence in this case. Many times, this oral fluid collection device has THC attached to it, where pre-employment, many times, employers have chosen not to include it. And that's based on the laws, that have changed dramatically around the country. It's based on the fact that we have 40 states that are allowing the use of marijuana either for medicinal reasons or recreational reasons. Employers have made that decision. Some of the times they do use marijuana as part of that screening process, and some of the times they don't. It's almost a 50-50 split now. So let's cut to the chase, really. What are the benefits of implementing a virtual drug testing process? There are a ton of them. And I'll start with, I'm going to go bottom up because we make it accessible through its compatibility with any device. So it can be a mobile phone, it can be a tablet, it can be a desktop, it can be a laptop. It doesn't require that a separate app is downloaded. This process is digital, so we've removed paperwork from this process. If you recall, I said the kit is serialized. So that kit is validated from a serialization perspective. If we are going towards a secondary collection, that lab admissible oral fluid collection device, that vial with the security seal is also serialized. So we are connecting the kit to the vial and then to a digital chain of custody. No paperwork involved. We are creating literally like a DocuSign event where the donor is digitally signing their signature, then the proctor is signing their signature digitally, and then that digital chain of custody is sent to the laboratory where the person who accepts that specimen into the laboratory, the accessioner, also is digitally signing that digital chain. So that's how we're tying all pieces of the process together. And then if it does need to go to the MRO, they're also getting a digital chain. Super simple. 24/7 on-demand availability, being able to proctor this in-house by trained certified specialists, the proctors. Okay, very, very, very important that those proctors are employees of someone like our organization, not a third party. We don't want employers to receive third-party service. They're trained. They go through a definitive process regarding observing proctored sessions, then engaging with proctored sessions, then they're off, of course, on their own in proctoring their own sessions. But there are specific guidelines. There's a specific script that's used. So we're making this accessible to anybody, anywhere. And it's a comprehensive oral screening process that is conducted in a single visit. And I want to stress that, a single visit. We have seen other solutions that conduct a rapid oral fluid drug test, but then if they do have a non-negative event, they're then asking and requiring that donor to go and schedule a visit at a clinic for that secondary collection. This is an end-to-end solution. It encompasses all phases of what a would-be drug test requirement has: screening and a potential confirmation. These are real-time results. 95% of the time, employers know immediately, and this is fully digital. And then this visibility that I had previously talked about, the talent acquisition, the HR professionals, employment health and safety specialists will see how this process evolves from when the actual kit was ordered to the tracking information of the kit, to when the kit actually arrives, to when the individual has, quote, scheduled their event, to it is going to the laboratory, it is under review, and it may need to be sent to an MRO for further evaluation. And then, of course, when the process is completed. That completion piece can come much sooner, or it comes after it has been further evaluated by the laboratory. Those are the benefits. They're mounting benefits of implementing a virtual drug testing process. So it makes it so easy for anyone to conduct a drug test. This demonstrates how your organization, you've made a commitment to empowering a more diverse workforce. I mean, every person's unique, and getting a drug test can many times, I think I'm being, conservative, can many times prove to be a challenge. They have a job right now. Maybe they have to literally apply for personal time off to go get their drug test done. Who knows if they have the ability, they have the transportation, to go and get that done. So many times single parents or a parent has the need for a babysitter to go and get this done. We're changing the modality. No longer does it need to be a urine-based test. It now can be an oral fluid-based test. So the whole reasons as to why someone can't provide a specimen, it goes away. The list goes on. It's about fairness. It's about equality, and employers that are committed to a drug-free workplace, this elevates that whole process. We're working to understand whether this person is under the influence presently or not. We're raising the level of integrity that this process embodies. You don't just have a laboratory report, you have a digital chain of custody, and you have a recording. This is all stored AWS blockchain. It's available for 7 years. So you can begin to see the mounting reasons why a virtual drug testing system makes it so much easier for organizations to empower a more diverse workforce. So we're at that point now where I'm hoping you all have a lot of questions that you would like to ask. I'll leave it and pass it back to our moderators, and hopefully they can pass some questions along my way that I can address.
Thank you so much, Andres. That was very informative. I recently had the opportunity to experience remote proctored oral fluid drug testing and the process myself. It was super easy. The proctor that I had was very friendly and very professional. As a 20-year plus drug and background screening professional, I've taken my fair share of employment drug screens to meet compliance requirements. And after experiencing this process myself, I would totally feel comfortable utilizing proctored oral fluid drug testing to reduce costs for, for cause or reasonable suspicion testing, which often can happen after hours, and the cost for that can be extraordinary. Also, for utilizing it for pre-employment, I think that it gives applicants and candidates a great, first impression of an organization. It really says that an organization cares about, their feelings and their level of comfort. And I also would recommend it for any non-regulated return to duty or random drug screening, and would definitely recommend the service to any HR friend or client that was seeking, a solution to, some of these drug scheduling challenges that we encounter. We would love to answer any questions that you guys might have. So if you haven't had a chance yet, please go ahead and type your question into the questions pane. I see that some of you have already found that pane, so we will just move right forward and start asking those questions. Danielle, do you want to go ahead and provide the questions to Andreas?
I would love to. We got a few great questions that came through. So the first one is, approximately how long would it take for the candidate to receive the drug test kit in the mail from the time of order?
Great question. So we have a definitive service that ensures the kit will arrive in 2 days or less. Based on just geographics, I would say more than 60% of the time it arrives in at least a day, but definitively in 2 days or less.
Great. The next question we have is, who would be the proctor during testing? Would this be the employer or someone from Novir?
That's a great question. So yes, this is something that we hold very near and dear to our heart here at Novir. They are a Novir employee. So they go through a very strict process of becoming certified as a proctor. It is about maintaining that level of experience, that type of experience we are trying to extend to either the would-be candidate or to the existing employee. And we are also maybe removing that, whatever you want to call it, judge, quote, executioner as a third party, that we're handling this on behalf of the employer. So they no longer feel like obligated to conduct the drug tests in-house. They can remove themselves from that situation. And that is, I think, a key benefit to this experience, that we as an organization have created the virtual drug testing service ensure the experience. We are not utilizing a third party call center, if you will, to conduct these proctored sessions.
Andreas, from my end, I can definitely tell you that the person that proctored my drug screen by far was more professional and really more knowledgeable than anybody who I've ever experienced in a clinic. So definitely bravo to the level of training that the proctors are receiving, because it definitely shows in how they treat donors when they're dealing with them, in a drug screening situation.
Appreciate that information, Cindy.
The next question that we have is, are there different kits that are available with separate testing panels? For example, testing panels without THC.
Yeah, that's another great question. So we have. There at present, I want to say there's 12 different panels that have been created, those with, and of course those without THC. Depending upon employers' policies, some of them may have a little bit more robust panel that encompasses some of the prescription medications that we've all seen being abused, and so we can get to 10 or 11, 12 drugs in those panels. But we feel pretty confident that what we have available now should meet the lion's share of policies that exist with employers today. But we're not beholden to just those, and we're always willing to engage and listen and say, okay, are there other panels that would be needed to be able to support a virtual drug testing program for a particular employer or vertical market?
Great. Another great question is, are you finding that employers are switching easily over to this model for urine to saliva? Are they replacing most of their drug testing with your services?
This transcends in a number of ways. Like we are sitting here today, education is key towards the adoption of it. And everyone that is interested in a virtual drug testing process they start somewhere. They start at the beginning with a single experience. Now, Cynthia, you pointed towards this is something like you've never experienced. It goes so beyond, the type of service that you would anticipate from a urine or in-person, drug testing experience. So, and once the employer has received that information, has received the education, regarded, there is this sense of urgency that we're experiencing that the employers have for wanting to adopt this. And I think that goes and comes in a couple of ways. One is how competitive the market is to create and provide a better hiring experience. Two, looking at post-incident or reasonable suspicion scenarios, they're very costly and they're never done the same way twice. We're bringing stability, dependability, reliability, and predictability to that process. It's kind of always been the ugly stepchild in the drug testing industry. It no longer has to be that way. So the adoption rate is moving very quickly towards employers wanting to adopt this level of service. Great question.
Absolutely. And even we even see that like state governments are moving in this direction as well, because recently California and Washington changed their regulations so that if you are going to test for marijuana, that you have to that you do need to utilize a test that actually tests for active THC and not the cannabis metabolite, which is what we traditionally know can basically linger in urine for up to 30 days, depending on that person's body composition and their level of use. And so I think products like this that allow employers to still ensure that they have safe workplaces, and still ensure that they're able to test for people who are, quote unquote, showing up high at work. This allows them to do that, but still meet those, growing state requirements that are in, California and Washington were the first two states, but, I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that they're not going to be the last two,
Right.
and so it does seem like this is the trend that that even the government is going into, of utilizing oral fluid testing, versus urine-based drug testing.
Cynthia, if I may, just to kind of go back to that previous question, I'd like to pay that answer a little bit more homage. The cheese manufacturer that chose to try, working with this process about a year ago. They began at one location, began to use it, from a pre-employment perspective. And we're going to fast forward from that first moment of when they decided to work with us to create a virtual drug testing program. That now has become a program where over 75% of their drug testing needs are done virtually. And that includes pre-employment, that includes post-incident reasonable suspicion. So they've seen the value, and there are employers that are getting in line to do just the same thing, to move from where they were to where they are today. Cynthia pointed towards the changing laws within the landscape of, of every state. That is influencing the use of oral fluid. I will say one more thing. Been to a couple of industry forums. One was an international forum, one was a national forum recently. At the international one, nothing but subject matter experts within the world of drug testing. Not a one talked about urine as the modality. 100% of the people were talking about oral fluid. And then at this industry forum that I was at last week, the momentum, the discussions regarding oral fluid, we know, right, that DOT has approved oral fluid as the next modality for their testing program. That's making its way into the non-regulated world of what we're doing to accommodate the virtual drug testing programs of the world.
That's great information, and I agree 100%. I mean, times are definitely changing. 10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought of even doing virtual job interviews, and now, such a high percentage of them are done in that, in utilizing that modality. And it's, the workforce is definitely always evolving.
This is true.
So,
keep up with the workforce.
Absolutely. Danielle, do we have any additional questions at this time?
We have two more.
Okay, perfect.
One of the questions is, how long will it take to get the results of the test?
Okay, so if we're talking about that group that I referenced before, when we begin the proctoring session with them, that 90 to 95% of the time we're done in 10 minutes. That result is immediately reported to the employer. So the employer can come in to the portal and view that result in minutes. The other piece, the other 5%, it gets sent overnight to the laboratory. The laboratory rescreens, confirms it, and then it goes to the MRO. We're talking, about 2 to 3 days there, which is well within the norm or less than you would experience otherwise. But I think it's also important to note the choice of laboratory is critical to the process, that the laboratory can accommodate a rescreen and confirmation, that the laboratory can accommodate a comprehensive list of drugs, not just the quote mainstay NIDA 5 that typically are encompassing of most policies, but ones that go beyond that. Things like oxycodone, oxymorphone, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, the benzodiazepines, the barbiturates of the world, heroin. Those are all things we can do on with separate drug tests with oral fluid drug tests. And the laboratory is also a really key component of making sure you can turn around these results in a timely manner.
Perfect. I think we're at the top of the hour, but Danielle, why don't we go ahead and ask that final question? I just want to make sure that we can meet everyone's needs.
The last question is, how would this test allow for psychoactive marijuana testing?
We are testing for the parent, right? We're not going to be looking for the metabolite of THC. And in an oral fluid testing environment, it takes much longer for that drug to be metabolized. So the benefit here is for one to be able to screen, and this points towards how we are actually collecting the saliva and where that THC would lie inside the mouth cavity. So that process also produces a higher level of efficacy when we are screening for the parent in marijuana. And this points, towards the changes, the laws that you alluded to, Cynthia, where states are now no longer allowing the metabolite of THC to be screened for. They're all requiring for that psychoactive parent drug to be screened for. So that's another great question. That is a big part of what's changing in the drug testing industry today and why oral fluid is becoming the modality of choice.
Perfect. Well, Andreas, thank you so much for your time today on behalf of AccuSource HR and Novir. We want to thank, both Andreas for sharing his knowledge with us today, but also and expertise, but also for our audience for joining us for today's webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.